The Wisconsin Badgers suffer a pretty disappointing loss here, 77-73 to the Oregon Ducks here on Saturday. Let's break this one down. Starting off in the first half, the Badgers started off a little slow. Oregon kind of right in the mix there, and Oregon jumped out to a 17-14 lead over the first 8 minutes. But then after that, you see the Badgers really pour things on. A 24-4 run, very similar to their one against Indiana at home a couple of weeks ago. And it was John Tonje leading the way, 16 points. Tonje was aggressive there, 4 or 5 on twos, and he had, a couple of threes in that mix as well. 13 in a row at one point for John Tonje, and that led to the biggest lead of the day. A 38-21 lead for the Badgers. They go into halftime with a 38-26 lead. Tonje was a big part of that. Stephen Crowell as well. Crowell had 10 first-half points, got a lot of one-on-one opportunities against Oregon center Nate Biddle, forced Biddle into foul trouble as well. Biddle with 3 first-half fouls, and so things were looking good for the Badgers early on. They weren't hitting the threes, but they still had a good amount of offensive success thanks to the aggressiveness from Tonje and Stephen Crowell. In the second half, though, is really where things started to take a turn. Wisconsin just seemed out of rhythm for nearly the entire half, but especially the last 8 minutes or so. The Badgers had a 62-47 lead, midway through that second half, and that's where things started to spiral. Wisconsin struggled with turnovers, they struggled with tentativeness, they weren't themselves for that last 8 minutes. You didn't see much attacking the rim. The Badgers ended with 0 second-half free throws. Stephen Crowell only had 2 shot attempts as Oregon looked to take him away by having some more ball pressure up front to limit the touch, the post touches, as well as doubling Crowell on a couple of occasions. Elsewhere, you didn't see much aggressiveness overall from the team. Tried to shoot threes, and Wisconsin didn't see the threes come in at the same success that they usually do. And overall, the Badgers struggled with turnovers. They had 17 turnovers in this game. And when you look at the late game stretch, Wisconsin really struggled with turnovers. At times this year, you've seen the Badgers, play close games, but ultimately pull out, especially when they're ahead in those close games because of their elite free throw shooting. They didn't get a chance to shoot those free throws in the second half because of those turnovers. That ended up hurting them as Oregon climbed back from that 17-point deficit, ended up hitting a couple of key threes in the final minute, and they forced overtime. Then in overtime, Nate Biddle took over. He had a really strong second half. The Badgers didn't attack him as much. You see him play a little bit more freely with more minutes in the second half, and Biddle took over. That led to the 77-73 loss for the Badgers. Just seemed out of sorts, which is uncommon and uncharacteristic, as head coach Greg Gard said, for this veteran-laden team. Nonetheless, you got to bounce back. You've got a favorable matchup on Tuesday here back at the Kohl Center against the Washington Huskies. But this one's a tough loss for the Badgers because they were projected as a number 2 seed coming into this game. This game, though, was kind of seen as a must-win to remain as a number 2 seed. Badgers get a little bit of help. Texas A&M was as well, but they dropped in the Big Ten standings now with an 11-5 record. They're tied, with Maryland and Purdue, but they did lose to Maryland, so they're currently 5th in the Big Ten standings. That is something that they will look to improve on when they play Washington this Tuesday. So stay tuned for all the coverage. We've got a lot coming after this disappointing loss.